This is about exactly that, setting a table at which everyone can come, take what they need, and move beyond. Distributive justice is where our hearts should be when we come together at the table. It, of course, grew up into a highly ritualized, highly symbolic meal at which the community met. And I won't go into the details of how that happened or what it came to mean. But to bring you fast forward to the time that we are in now, when we gather in this space to talk about what it is, and then downstairs when we will actually enact what it is that we do. We have in this place held communion around tables in the aisle, around the table up here, in our pews, in lines as we have processed forward. But each time what we've been doing is tying it, I see it, as tying it to our commitment to community, sometimes to the idea of baptism. Baptism in the church is another one of those symbols that goes right down through the roots of our history, right down to those beginning days. When it took place after someone had repented, that is, stopped in their tracks, looked at what they were doing, and turned around and went a different way, because they found that what they were doing at the time was not right. It's what happens to us when someone comes to us with a piece of information that completely changes our perspective on the world, on what's going on in it, our complicity in those things that are wrong, and we're stopped in our tracks. We think, I had no idea. And then we head off in another direction. It was sort of what we were doing with the Lead Now group on Wednesday night when we are hoping to bring together, we brought together the ideas of what it is about Canada that we think is so sacred, so important, that it can't be lost in the term of a particular government, in a vision that only takes us 4 or 8 or 12 years down the road, but that must be held sacred because it's who we are as Canadians through the course of our history. And so we hoped, as we gathered those ideas together, that we would take them to someone who would go, oh, I had no idea, and stop and make a shift and demand that ideas be placed on the table for discourse so that we could have conversations about them, so that we might have an opportunity to make change in the world. Repentance was a symbol of that moment when we saw that we were living in a way that went against what we could or should be doing according to the understandings of a moral and ethical life. Now that understanding has shifted and changed over time as well, and we seek to interpret our ethical choices given the contexts we have in our lives every moment. What is it that I have to do? Who am I responsible for? How far can I go in this area and not risk losing myself or losing respect for myself? The balancing of all those things, all those different values that we have in our lives are what inform our ethical choices. And every time we have a cup of coffee, every time we sit down to have a conversation with someone, every time we take part in a political action, we're participating in those ethical choices. So baptism here has come to mean, and we ask the questions, do you commit to a journey of discovery for your child, for yourself, as you move forward in this spiritual life that is ours? Do you commit to that journey and everything it will bring to you, the challenges, the opportunities that are placed before you, to actually see how you are in the world, to question what it is that you're doing, to check and see whether that's right or wrong, and stop and assess and then perhaps move on. That whole process of baptism has been about committing to the spiritual journey. And so back to communion, because communion at West Hill has become a place where we talked about sustenance on that journey. The letter that was written back in the early 1700s by the Earl of Chesterfield, Philip Dormer Stanhope, wrote the letter to his son, an illegitimate son who was going to school, but Stanhope wanted to raise him properly, to give him some values by which he could live. Now, the Earl of Chesterfield himself had been born into incredible, wealth, part of the gentry, one who was able to do the tour of the grand tour of Europe and then come back to be part of the Parliament, part of those in England who ran the country, who made choices, who had the power. He was, as we would say, born with a silver spoon in his mouth. And the reading that Elaine shared with us is the reading from the letters that he sent to his son, and you can see in them some very good opportunities, some very good ideas about how to live and how to be with other people. When you know that Stanhope was actually a very self-centered, very selfish man who would lie whenever it was important to him and better him in a political situation, that he would do so with little regard to what else might happen as a result of those lies, you can see that his dissembling is sort of knit into the fabric of those words that he offers to his son. Don't put anybody down if you think that, they might be an opportunity for you to get ahead in the future, because you don't really want to tick people off who may be the opportunity for you to advance at some point. Now, when I read it first, before I read anything about Stanhope, I thought, this is a great reading. And it is a great reading. But when you read a little bit more about who he was and what he did, and he didn't do anything really bad at all. He just was part of that political machination that goes on, and the image that is set for others to revere and hold up with reverence. So I questioned, perhaps, some of what it is that Stanhope offered his son, who, breaking Stanhope's heart, the Earl of Chesterfield's heart, married a commoner. He only found that out after his son tragically died at an early age. But born into the families that we're born into, we are offered the wisdom that they can give us, whether our station is that of Stanhope's or something a little more common like those that most of us were raised in. We are given pictures of how the world should be and how we might grow up within it and offer ourselves to it by what our parents offer us around tables, around the places that we sit when we take a meal with them, when we sit down for that serious lecture that your parents sat you down for, around whatever it was that your misdemeanor was related to. Those tables around which we come to know one another, that we look each other in the eyes, that we offer up our day and say, this is what I did, and we hear what has been offered to us from them. And we are transformed bit by bit in that milieu into the people that we become. Stanhope grew into this person who had a very serious persona, who was himself made who he was by his parents and by his milieu and by his standing in life. And I want to give you another reading that came from him, just to give you a little bit of an idea about what he offered us, and then we'll go on and see what someone else might offer. I would heartily wish, this is again to his son, I would heartily wish that you may often be seen to smile, but never heard to laugh while you live. Frequent and loud laughter is the characteristic of folly and ill manners. It is the manner in which the mob express their silly joy at silly things, and they call it being merry. In my mind there is nothing so illiberal and so ill-bred as audible laughter. I am neither of a melancholy nor a cynical disposition, and am as willing and as apt to be pleased as anybody, but I am sure that since I have had the full use of my reason, nobody has ever heard me laugh. A little louder. Okay, I want you to, don't laugh. This is great music. Maybe you can clap on the offbeat. Very good. You can stand up if you want. Stand up. Thank you. That was James Brown, as most of you know, who did not grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth. Not even close. The circumstances of James Brown's first years are appalling. They're stunning. He spent a lot of it in a whorehouse where he lived with his aunt. He had to work doing things like shining shoes and dancing to raise pennies to take back to help his family survive. He had very few hopes in life and very little that anyone would have thought that he would make of himself. And yet he brought this merriment to so many through the gift that he offered, through his music, his persistence, his work ethic. One of the most energetic leaders in the music industry throughout his lifetime, one of the hardest workers and recognized as such. His beginning is so tragically different than the beginnings of the Earl of Chesterfield. And yet the two of them have stuff to offer into our lives that we can take and learn from and become wise through. James Brown with his reflections on music, his reflections on family, his reflections on how we are to live, and Stanhope with the gifts that he's given that were published by his son's widow, the letters that he wrote to his son. We each know people in our lives that have come from incredibly difficult circumstances, and yet, against all odds, have grown into incredible human beings that offer us hope and love and beauty, that inspire us, that are good to everyone despite the fact that in their early years they may not have known a moment of warmth from their family, from the people around them, from any of their circumstances. And we know people that have grown up with everything handed to them, who could hardly find the time of day to say a nice word to anyone as an adult. There's a mystery in all this that I think we could spend years trying to discern. What exactly is it that allows someone to grow up in privilege and become poison, and allows one to grow up in poison and become gift to community? And now back again to communion. When we come together in this community, we have much to offer each other. We have the gift of our past, whether it's a past of privilege or a past of horror. We have that gift to offer those that we meet and know and with whom we share this space. We have the opportunity in community to speak truthfully about who we are and to reflect back to those in community what we truly see of them, not to the point that it shows, a lack of grace, but certainly to the point that it can be an honest opportunity for us to grow. We have in community the opportunity to offer up those moments that are a gift of repentance to each and every one of us, to say, did you know that this caused that? And in that is pain and sorrow and judgment. And did you know that you could change and do something different? When we come together in communion, we offer all of that to one another as sustenance for the journey. That journey we committed to, those of us who have been baptized and been part of the community as we've made the commitments to those who have been baptized to be part of a spiritual journey, a struggle to know ourselves fully, a challenge to be faced with the truths that are on either side of us and to integrate them into our lives and then live with that truth going forward. Communion is coming together and being willing to be that for one another. I want to take a few moments now and invite you to, in a few moments of silence, think about your growing up. And I may mean, for those of you who are well into your 60s, I could be talking about last week. So, in your growing up, what are those moments? Who are those people that have offered you the opportunity to be gift into the world? That helped create gift by creating you and making you who you are for this world.